Have you ever knit a sweater straight to the pattern and it just didn't fit quite right? Well, that is not because of your knitting. That is because these sweaters are designed for standard bodies. And really nobody has a standard bodies. Vintage knitters knew that a knitting pattern would only ever be a starting point and they had to make adjustments based on their body's proportions. Today I want to share this technique with you where you create basically a map of your body. So whenever you're knitting a new sweater, all you need to do is draw the schematics from the pattern, put your block atop, and you know how to adjust the pattern for the perfect fit. You never have to think about it ever again. Does that sound good? We're also going to compare our own body to a standard size so we can understand why a standard size will never fit our bodies. We have a lot to cover in this video, so we're going to head on over right to the patterning table. So welcome to the patterning table. These are the resources we're going to use today. I'm only going to talk about the book real quick. If you're only doing knitting patterns and you only want to do the basic block, this is definitely over the top. But I can highly recommend this book if you're also sewing and if you want to get into drafting with sewing too. I do all my drafting with this book. This has been a really nice investment. I'm obviously not going to share any of the numbers or something from the book. I will link a free resource for you down below that has rather similar numbers. And we're going to use my own numbers and a slightly adjusted process. So I don't feel too bad sharing this with you as it's a combination of different drafting courses I've done over the years. You're going to need your own measurements, a ruler, and if you have one of these French curve sewing rulers, use it, but you don't really need it. I just have it lying around and the curve just looks nicer. Okay, so we're going to work ourselves from the top to the bottom. So we're going to do our length measurements first, and then we're going to do our width measurements, and then we're going to combine all the dots. So we're starting at the top with 0. This is our starting point. We're going to go down, in my case, 2 centimeters. So this will be the slope of your shoulder. And that kind of depends on your proportions. In the standard patterns I've read, they usually do something between 1.5 and 2.5 centimeters. And I'm really good with 2 centimeters. From that, we're going to go down the length of your arm's eye. The arm's eye is the distance from your shoulder to the widest point of your bust. So that is in vintage patterns where if you're knitting bottom up, where you would start decreasing and shaping the armhole. Okay, so we're going to do that. In my case, that is 21 centimeters. We're then going to draw in a line for our bust point, and that is, in my case, again, 2 centimeters, and that will depend on the fullness of your bust. I will link a short down below from another creator. She did a really great short that shows you how to determine how much extra volume you need for your full bust adjustment and where your full bust point is. Okay, and then from the arm's eye point, we're going to go down another length to our waist. And that will be your natural waist, so the most narrow point at your body. That, in my case, is 20 centimeters. And then we're going to go down to our low waist. So that is the widest point before we go to the hips. So kind of in between our hips and our natural waist. In my case, that is 5 centimeters. If you don't want to go to your natural waist, I would highly recommend getting out a sweater that you like that is longer than your natural waist, if that is the style you're wearing. And that will be the length in total that you need from your arm's eye down to that point. That will be the length of your sweater from the arm's eye onwards. So these are all the length measurements we need. Now we're going to go into the width. What you need is the circumference of your chest, your bust, your waist, and your low waist. And then we will divide that by 4. Why by 4? Because we're doing half a front. The front is half of the total circumference, so 1/4. So in my case, that is 22.5 centimeters for the low waist. Then we're going to do our natural waist, and that is 20. We will need our bust, and that is 24. And we will need our chest measurement. And the chest measurement is just the circumference of the front top of your body. So we're only going to divide that by 2. That will run like 10 centimeters above your arm's eye cast off edge. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is the neckline. So what most of the courses recommend is measuring around your neck front and back, and that will be the measurement for the neckline or neck opening. I do love my neckline really, really close, but I do not want to add an opening in the back because I find that really tedious and I don't really like the look. So what I do and what works for me, so no guarantee here, but it works for me, is I'm going to take the circumference of my head and I'm going to divide that by 4. And that is the space I need in this area. And then that is a design decision on how to distribute that. I usually distribute it 50-50 in the pattern. So the number I will get, I will divide by 2 again. And that is really similar to the neck size opening. So in my case, that will be 7 centimeters in length and 7 centimeters in width. Okay. The last thing we need to do is we need to add the shoulder measurement. And that will start at the point where your neckline shaping finishes. In my case, that is 9 centimeters, and I usually give myself another centimeter for seaming in the neckline and the sleeves. And as we discussed before, that will be sloped. So we need to go down these 2 centimeters. So somewhere at this height, and it needs to be 9 centimeters starting from here, or 10 we did say. So it's going to come in a little bit as we're going diagonal. And these are all the points you need for your basic sloper. We're now going to connect these pieces. And as I said, I have all these rulers from drafting my own patterns. You totally don't need them. You can just connect them by hand. This looks kind of steep because I have a rather large distance between low waist and waist. And then we're going to fill in the arm's eye. And that will look something like this. And this is it. This is your basic sloper. We have our chest measurement, our bust, our waist, and our low waist. I will cut that out, and then we will compare it to a basic block and why it is really obvious that just never really works. Just a quick word as I'm currently editing the video. If you have any specific fit issues, let me know in the comments down below. We're going to cover adjusting this block to our personal needs in 2 weeks' time. I can totally take in some of your problems and try to tell you how to fix them. So let's move on to having a look at why standard sweater will never fit us. We're going to have a quick look at the block we've just drawn for my measurements and a standard size 12 block. So this is the block that is closest to my bust measurement. And if we put that atop one another, we can see, well, there. We can see that, yes, that is pretty close, like I would say like half a centimeter difference. But other than that, none of this really fits. So if I had knit a sweater in a standard size 12, it would really hang really awkwardly off my shoulder. It would sit fine on the bust. It would be too narrow in the waist and definitely too narrow on the low waist. So with making this block, you've taken a huge step in understanding your proportions of your body and where you need to adjust a pattern. We're going to have a closer look at how to adjust specific areas in 2 weeks' time, because I want to give you some time to draw up your block. I want to give you one general pattern adjustment idea just for now. If you have a vintage pattern that you want to adjust, they usually come in a size or 2. And vintage knitters knew they needed to adjust these patterns overall, because you're not going to start adjusting just areas if it's like 3 or 4 sizes too small. So what they would do, or the technique they would use, is the spread and slash method. So let's say this is the size 12 and you need a size 18. So you need considerable more width. You would not add that width at the side seam because that would distort the design lines drastically. You would cut this piece open in the middle. You would put both pieces aside and add width in the center that you would need to get to your bust measurement. You would glue them on that piece of paper, and then your piece would be considerably larger. And then you would use your basic block to tweak the change in those minor areas. So never just add width at one side, but rather add it to the whole. If you want to add length, I would usually recommend adding length somewhere above the waistline, but lower to the waist than to the bust, and somewhere between your bust and your neckline, so somewhere around the chest area. Okay, so I will see you again at the red chair so we can discuss the next steps in this series and how you can get involved in the videos I'm going to make for the following weeks. Hey, we've made it. I'm so proud of you for taking this step because this is just so much more valuable than just getting a new knitting pattern. This is your pattern as a basic starting point for every sweater you're going to knit, and they're all going to fit better than ever before. I'm so glad we're taking this journey together. I would be really interested to know in the comments down below, where does your block differ most from a standard block? Are you excited for adjusting the patterns? If you have any specific fit adjustments you would like me to have a closer look at, drop them in the comments down below. I can totally adjust the script for the video. It's not been filmed yet, and I'd love to take in your needs and create a video that will actually help you and you can use as a library to always come back to. Now that we've finished this, I'm going to leave you to your knitting. Next week, I'm going to share this magazine with you, this vintage knitting magazine with so many beautiful patterns that are all really different than what we've seen in the last Flip Through Friday. I've already started knitting this one, and I'm going to share the process with you because let me tell you, it is different than anything I've ever knitted before. It might look like a basic sweater, but boy, was this a labor, or is this a labor of love. Okay, happy knitting, and I will see you next week.